Welcome back. This is Liz Fogerland with Olive Branch Studios. This morning, I thought I would give you an idea of some of the things I teach in my watercolor classes. And what you need basically is a round brush, about a size 8 or a size 10 works just fine, and your watercolor paints, water, and a paper towel to dab with. I'm going to go over some of the basic techniques that you would use when you're watercolor painting. So let's get started. I have a size 8 Princeton Neptune, one of my favorite brushes. This one has been around the block. But guys, what I like about these brushes, you can kind of roll them on the towel and straighten out the ends and they dry with that point. They're fabulous brushes. Okay, so we're going to start with wet on dry. What does that mean? I'm going to have a wet brush with wet paint, of course, and dry paper. That's all that means. So I'm going to grab some paint and I'm going to paint something. I'm just going to paint a circle. I like making circles. So you're not adding water to this, to the paper. You added water to the pigment, yes. And you can make lots of things. It is important to remember when you have watercolor paints that you have to activate your paints. Just spritz them down with, I use a spray bottle from Grove. You could wet them down individually just by dabbing water onto them, but you get a much higher quality look when you're painting if you activate them first. Otherwise your paints are kind of dull. Okay, so super easy. Dry paper, wet paint. Now, our next one is wet on wet. What does that mean? I'm going to wet the paper first. I'm not going to flood the paper. Just wet it until there's like a nice shiny, and I apologize if I sound congested. I really am. Like the spring and summer and winter, my allergies are, I don't know, something with trees right now. Okay, so my paper is wet. Hopefully you can see the shininess there. And I'm gonna grab a blue color. Blue is my favorite, personally. So my paper is wet, my brush is wet, my paint is wet. And all I have to do for this technique is drop the paint in, and you can see how the water that's on the paper just starts bleeding into it. So you can do that, and it is just a beautiful technique that you can use to paint. It helps spread the paint. It gives it a different look as you're painting than you normally would get. You get those bleeds. If you can see it going out here. I really enjoy doing my paintings like this, especially I like to paint flowers a lot. So this gives flowers a nice, I know, it just looks good when they're kind of bleeding together. Okay, so wet on wet. And we'll talk more about bleeding in a minute when we're adding colors together. Okay, so dry brushing. All right, what is dry brushing? Whereas we have the wet on dry, we had the dry paper, wet brush. This time I'm gonna get water on my brush, dry paper, and I'm gonna start with some wetness, but I am actually gonna dab off a lot of the water from my paintbrush. And then I'm just gonna kind of lay my brush sideways, and I still have a lot of water on there. Just go across, and you can hear the scraping sound. You hear it? And can you imagine what we could use this technique to paint? And if you're thinking water, you would be correct. Because when we're painting water, we kind of leave those open places for light shining through, okay? You can do this with several other things as well. You can even layer on top of it, but that is simply it. Not much water or paint on your brush, no water or paint on the surface until you put it there, and then just spread it sideways, and you aren't going to hear the scraping sound. Okay. Ooh, I forgot to get out my crayons. So one of my favorite things to do is write with a crayon and paint over it. You can use these wax sticks from the Hobby Lobby or just a regular crayon. They work about the same. And you can make designs like snowflakes, hearts, anything. You can write your name, anything that you want to pop out of the background. Okay. The hard part is you can't see it after you've drawn it because it's clear. All right, so if I want to like do a picture with snow in it and I want to make one of those cool snowflakes, okay, so I'm going to grab, I need a little bit more blue paint for some snow, not a snow, but snowy background, and I'm just going to paint right over the top. And this is where the wax is actually resisting the pigment. So it pushes it away, leaving the wax behind. Pretty cool, really. Okay. Now, our next step involves rubbing alcohol. Not beer, not anything weird, just rubbing alcohol. So what I have in here is, it's just a little dropper, is rubbing alcohol. And what it does, when you put it in with pigment, with watercolor paint, it pushes the pigment off to the side. So I'm just going to draw a square, but I'm going to draw another circle. I had enough with the squares today. Not really. So just a nice picture. And you're going to want to have that wetness to it, because if it's super dry, this will not work very well. Okay, that's my brush. Now, I don't have a lot in here because I don't have a big space that I want to drop it to. But once I drop it, just drop it really slowly. You can be methodical in where you're dropping. There you go. You can do raindrops. You can make a cute little face. It can look like the moon. Like if you do a gray color or black color or even yellow, you could do this, and you could have where the pigment's getting pushed away by the rubbing alcohol. You can have that crater looking effect. It's very cool. I actually enjoy doing the alcohol drops. All right, let's talk about blooms. Blooms, we're going to be doing basically the same thing that the alcohol drops do, but we're using water instead of alcohol. I say alcohol, we'll say rubbing alcohol. You know, I've never actually tried putting real alcohol in paint. I'm not sure what the turnout would be. So again, we want to have the wet paint, okay? And I'm just going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to drop water here, here, and here. Now, this effect is not nearly as fast as the alcohol drops, because that's almost immediately that the alcohol pushes the pigment away. With the blooms, with the water, it takes a little bit more to get that pushed away. But with this, we can create things like waves in the water. It's really hard to see on the blue too. Let me see if I can find another color. I have some of this mixed up here. Okay, I'm gonna drop some. And a lot of time, there it goes. That one's really easy to see. The blue is there, it's just harder to see. And I don't know why. But quite often when we have blooms, they're not intentional. It's where you're painting and sometimes you just drop a dab of water in the wrong place. Can you fix a bloom if you don't want it there? Definitely. You can go back in and take off the extra color or extra water, okay? And it would be a process, but if you're not wanting that look for your picture, just take it off, dab it on the towel, there you go, and then go back in with the color you had intended to use, and try not to drop it on there this time. But can you use this as a technique for painting? You betcha. And it typically turns out pretty cool looking, even when it's an accident. I mean, when I'm doing flowers, I think I've dripped more on leaves, which is kind of weird, but I do. It makes me think of how sometimes leaves out in the sun get the sunspots on them. And I'm like, okay, so I leave mine because it looks more intentional that way. It's kind of neat. Okay, next step, let's talk about charging. All right, I'm blooming over onto my charging. Charging is where we have one color and we want to add a second color to it. I do this a great deal with my flowers because so many flowers in this world have more than one color. I've used it with irises and what do they call pansies, with lilies. I've used this technique with a lot. So you have your wet paint and you're gonna go in and grab another color. And I just took this color straight from the well and I'm just going to dab it in there and you can watch it bleed into the blue. And when you're making flowers and it does this, it is just so, so pretty. And it just goes the way that you set it up to go. That is called charging. One of my favorite techniques. Okay. I know, I hope I'm not moving too fast, but we can always slow things down. You slow the video down, watch it again. Our next is called splatter, and it is exactly what it sounds like. We would load up our brush with some good color, okay, and some water, a little bit of both, because in order to splatter, you're gonna have to have water on it. And there's a couple ways you could do this. My favorite and probably least messy is to put my finger out and just tap my brush fully loaded with paint on the end of my finger, and you get that splatter effect. It can look like snow falling down on your painting. It can just look like confetti, whatever works, you know. Another thing you can do, another way to try it, is if you get a different type of brush, one that's a little bit stiffer. And let me pick a different color here. And you can take it, and I don't know how to do it so you can see, and just pull the brush and let it splatter towards the paper. I tend to get more of that on me than I do the paper. See, it's not what you can see a little bit here, here, and here. And let me try a bigger brush. Of course, I was worried about a bigger mess. So taking that, I'm trying to do it so you can see it, and just pulling down with like my fingernail and splatter. It's more of a fine splatter that way, like you don't get the big thick bumps, and I'm not really worried about that. I personally like to do the one where I just tap over my finger, and now my finger and fingernail are both orange. That's okay, we like those things too. All right, our next technique. Our next technique does require table salt. You might think, table salt, what? So what we do is we get our paper or paint wet, and we just, whatever you're gonna paint. Say I'm painting clouds or snow falling. or a mountain range, or it's raining. There could be several different things here. So I don't want like crazy wet, but I definitely don't want dry paper. And what I'm gonna do is just take table salt, and the more coarse the salt is, the more definition you're gonna have to your picture. And weirdly enough, this is going to dry. You can actually see it already starting to take in the pigment and the water. That salt pulls it in. And so then we have to wait for it to dry. That's the hard part. Let it dry, and we'll come back to it. We're gonna let that dry, and then you can see the effect it has and how you can use it. I used it quite a bit last year. I did a lot of snow globes for my Christmas card orders, and I used that for a lot of the snow. It looks so cool. So easy to do too. All right, bleeding, or when a paint bleeds. I say bleeding, but when a paint bleeds together. So say you're wanting, so what we do with bleeding, sometimes it's intentional and quite often it's not. And most of the time when paints bleed, it's fixable. Like if I'm making a flower here, okay, and let me just draw a quick flower or paint a quick flower. Okay, so I've got my flower, and now I want to do the leaves, and I'm in a hurry, and so I grab some green and I just start doing the leaves. And what's going to happen if I touch my painting there, my colors are going to run together, and you can see how this is running up into the purple, and there's actually a little bit of purple going into the green as well. And if you're like me, I don't mind that if it's a little bit. Sometimes it will go like crazy out of control, and that's okay, because sometimes our centers are green. We'll just make it. This is bleeding, or when your paint bleeds, okay? It's just too much into my purple flower, ruins the flower. Can I fix bleeding? I can, because I'm gonna go and rinse my brush off real good and dry it. Best I can, get it dry. You can come in and pick that paint up, dry it off. Okay. Now it looks like a blank slate, so we're gonna start all over again. Go back and grab that purple and just paint over the top. Being sure not to hit that green the way we did before, okay? And there you go, very fixable, but that is when your paint bleeds. Now I have a couple spaces here. I wanted to talk about, because this is the fun part of painting, is finding out the different methods or styles of painting. One of the things that instructors don't tell you about is the brush stroke. That is so important, and I do believe it's called the compound brush stroke. What we do is we simply get our brush, and use a round brush. When you're starting out, use a round brush. Yes, play around with the others, but your round brush is going to teach you a whole lot, and you can use it for virtually anything you're doing in painting, okay? So a compound brush, you're going to start by barely touching the paper and then pushing down with more pressure and then coming back up with light pressure. And you can see where that heavy pressure was right in the middle. Now, how do I fix that? Because I want my paint to be more evenly spread. You just go back and spread it out. It's not a loss there. We use this brush a lot. I know I took a lot of that paint off. Let me get some green. We use this brush a lot, like a lot when we're painting flowers and leaves. And that is the brush stroke we use. So it's light pressure, heavy, and then pull right back up, okay? It's not rocket science, but it is something you're gonna wanna practice. Because if you don't practice it, you're gonna end up with ones that look like that or like this, and you don't have, I don't really mind when they look that way too much. It gives a character. Like I said, out in the sun, leaves always look a little different. So I'm not crazy picky about my leaves. So again, that compound stroke is simply light pressure, heavy pressure, light pressure again, push down and pull back up, okay? So push down, pull back up. And if you're hesitant about the weight, pushing it down and doing this, you are gonna end up with leaves that look more like this, where they're like half and half. So you have to practice that pressure stroke so they don't look that way. And it, again, it's not bad, because leaves in realistic lifetime tend to look this way. Some are sun faded, bugs get on them, whatever, life happens. So we want to have the ones, and be sure and practice that stroke. So push down, pull up, and the pressure is where it is at, okay? And again, I just used a size 8 round brush today. I do want to go back and look at our salt picture. I'm going to scrape off, it's not completely dry, but mostly dry, scrape off, and it comes off pretty easy. The salt does. Does it make a mess? Yeah, kind of a no-brainer. But there's our blue salt. I'm gonna throw that in the trash. But you can see the texture it leaves behind. And imagine the different things you could do with that look, including that snowy background. It's so fun. Or in your water, like in the ocean. Yes. So learned several different types of how to use your brush, and just different ways to paint. And I hope you can incorporate some of these in what you're doing. Yeah, I had kind of a brain fart there. I'm like, what is that called? And I hope you give these a try and keep practicing. Don't give up. The more you practice, the better you're gonna get, just like riding a bike. Keep practicing, guys. And again, this is Liz Fogerland with Olive Branch Studio. If you like what I've been doing on my channel, please hit that like and subscribe, and tell your friends about us over here. For now, you have a great day.